Hi, boys and girls. I have another story for you. The story today is called The Limp That God Sent. Well, Effie, she had gotten up at the crack of dawn, which was what she always did. She was the local country school teacher. She was only 17, but in those days, that's how old the teachers may be. Well, Effie, she gathered up her stack of books and she gathered up her lunch and she headed for that bright red barn because today there was something very special there. Last night on the train, her father had gone and gotten her brand new stallion named Buff. Now, months and months before, her uncle had called and said he'd chosen a spirited stallion for her, and he was training it for her to ride, as well as he was training that horse to a harness so she could run the buggy with it. She was so excited. When she got to the barn, oh, it was cold and crisp outside, but the sun was just coming up. It was going to be a perfectly gorgeous day. And today, she was going to ride Buff to school. She couldn't wait to show the neighborhood kids her new horse and her students. Well, when she got in the barn, she heard neigh, and she knew it was Truly, her old mare. Now, she'd had Truly since she was a little girl. Her father had brought home that mare for her, and she had been gentle and kind all these years. But now she was getting old. She called out to Truly, "It's okay, old girl. You don't have to make the school run today. You can be a lady of leisure." She neighed back, Truly did. And it sounded like to Effie that Truly was saying, "But I want to take you. I've always carted you around. I want to take you." Well, Truly went by and she patted that old mare gently, and then she went to the other stall, and in it was Buff. Buff was a beautiful brown stallion. Now, he didn't know Effie yet, so she climbed up on the gate in front of the stall and she stuck out her hand to that horse, and he put his nose in her hand, and she petted him with the other hand. Well, he was kind of dancing around the stall like he wanted to get going, and she was anxious too. So she went in, she put on the saddle, and she started to lead that stallion out of the stall. But when she got through the barn out into the sunlight, she noticed something. His right leg. He was limping. She was enough of a horseman to know that you don't go riding off on a horse with a limp in his leg. You could hurt him permanently. So much to her disgust, with a big sigh, she took him back to his stall. She took off the saddle and she took off the harness. It wasn't a harness, it was his halter. She went over to old Truly and she said, "Well, I guess you're going to have to haul me one more day." And now it was a little later, and she said, "You're going to have to pull the buggy because I have too many books to carry." So she went and she put all that stuff in the buggy. She didn't even bother to put a halter on old Truly. You know, when she was little and she had gotten Truly, when her dad had showed her her new mare, she had said, "Daddy, is she truly mine?" And the name had stuck. Here was Truly. Well, she led Truly to the front of that little spring buggy, and she harnessed her up, and down the road they started through that snowy, beautiful landscape. Well, she didn't even need to guide Truly with the reins because she had done it so many times from the house to the schoolhouse that she didn't even really need a driver. Well, every day when Effie had gotten to the schoolhouse, she would tie the rein to a branch on a maple tree there. And you know, the kids all loved Truly, and they would beg for rides on her. And Truly loved kids, so she always wanted to take them for rides anyway. Well, this morning, Effie, she went in and she got ready for school, and they started classes as usual. But around noon, she was doing the first graders' reading class when all of a sudden she saw out the window. The sky wasn't sunny anymore. It had suddenly darkened. She went over to that window and she looked out, and there were huge snow clouds. And as she watched, a big bank of clouds came scudding across the sky and totally covered above where the snow clouds had covered the sun. And the wind was picking up. And he looked out the window and he said, "Looks like a bad one coming up. Doesn't look like something that's gonna stop. It looks like it's a blizzard coming. You need to get these kids out of here and get them home before this catches up with us." Well, Miss Hawthorne, she stood there for just a minute. The school board that hired her had not said anything about sending kids home early when there was stormy weather, but as she looked out that window, she thought, the safety of the children come first. So she immediately got all the little ones together, and she put on their coats and their hats and their mittens, and then she sent them off with their bigger brothers and sisters with instructions to go right straight home because by now the snow was starting to fall. Effie, being the school teacher, she'd sent all the students away, but she was responsible for the school as well. So they had a big pot-bellied stove that sat almost in the middle of the schoolroom, and she banked it with wood. That means she put in great big pieces of wood that would sit in there and smolder. So when she would come back in the morning, there would still be coals for her to start the fire. She put everything away. She looked around. The school looked fine. Then she went outside. As soon as she got out the door, the wind hit her. Oh, she went over and she untied Truly from that maple tree. She got up into the buggy. My, it was cold, and that snow wasn't soft, fluffy flakes anymore. It was almost like little hard pieces of ice that were just poking themselves at her cheeks as she ran to get into the buggy. Well, she turned Truly around, and Truly knew what to do. She immediately started for home. She was glad to be going. Effie, As she was sitting in the buggy, she started to pray to God. Please, make those kids have all gotten home and get Truly and I home safely. Please, dear Father. And she said, Amen. When she sat there, it was cold in the buggy, and she noticed that by this time, Truly wasn't going so fast. And she knew, oh, Truly must be awfully cold. But there was nothing she could do about it right now. As they were going on, Effie could feel that Truly was indeed taking her around all the corners in that road safely home. But then, as they were going around one of the corners, the wheels of that buggy started to slide. She grabbed the reins and she held on tight and Truly did her best to stop, because that buggy was sliding off the side of the road into a snowbank. Well, when it stopped, Effie tried to get Truly to pull it out, and she tried very hard, but she couldn't get that buggy out of the snow. Let's see. Effie, she got out of the buggy, but she didn't let go of those reins, because when she looked around, she couldn't even see Truly. The snow was coming down so badly, and she was right in front of the buggy. So she took the reins, hand over hand. She walked, moving those reins closer till she finally got to Truly. She reached up and she unhooked that harness that held the buggy to Truly, and she hadn't put a halter on her. So she reached along that mare and she grabbed a hold of her mane and she pulled herself with both hands up onto the back of Truly, and she said, Truly, take us home. Take us home. And Truly started to plod away. Now it was intensely, intensely cold. And Effie and Truly had been out in the storm for a long time. Effie, she kept thinking to herself, you've got to hold on tight. And she was holding on to the poor Truly's mane. Finally, she was getting very tired, and her eyes were going shut, and she laid her head down on Truly's back, and she was just daydreaming. She thought about when she was a little girl and how Truly had been such a treasure to her. Then, of course, she could go faster because she was younger. She was thinking about all sorts of things from her childhood, and they plodded along and plodded along. She would try to open her eyes a little bit, and then they would go shut again. In the extreme cold, it makes your body want to go to sleep, and you mustn't go to sleep. She knew that, but she couldn't keep her eyes open. But Truly kept plodding along. And then, maybe she had gone to sleep, I don't know. Effie started to feel like she was falling. Oh, she must have been falling over a cliff, she thought. And then, as she was supposedly falling, she thought she landed, probably in a snowbank. And she opened her eyes, and it wasn't a snowbank at all. She was laying on her mama's bed. She had not fallen. She had been lifted onto her mother's bed, and her mom was sitting there and she was rubbing Effie's cold, cold hands, and the tears were running down her face. And Dad, he was walking back and forth, back and forth. And Effie, when she opened her eyes, she said, Mom. And of course, her mother was so tickled that she was awake. And then she thought about Truly. She said, Dad, is Truly okay? And Dad said, yes, Truly brought you all the way home. And she's fine. She's really cold, but she's fine. We rubbed her down real good, and we gave her some warm mash to eat to warm up her tummy, and we put a blanket on her. She should be okay. Oh, Truly was okay. And Truly had brought her all the way home. Truly had saved her life from that blizzard. Effie, she lay back on those pillows again. And then she got to thinking again. Dad, do you think that Buff could have got me home in this blizzard? And Dad was thinking, he said, I really don't know. He might have. And then he kept walking back and forth in that bedroom. Finally, he came back and he looked down at Effie and he said, no, I really don't think he could. He'd never been on the road to the school before. He doesn't even know where our house is. I brought him here last night from the other way, from the train station. No, I don't think he could have gotten you home. Effie remembered something. She said, Dad, I was going to take Buff to school this morning, and I took him out, but he was limping. His right leg was limping. And Dad looked puzzled. He said, I rode Buff today, trying to find you. He didn't have a limp for me. His legs are fine. Effie knew. It had to have been God that sent that stallion Buff to Limp so she wouldn't take him out. God knew that she needed Truly, who knew how to get her home. God had sent a Limp to save Effie's life. God uses all sorts of things, boys and girls, to save you and me. Thank you. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.